As any support, anime has its pros. Those unique productions that influence the audience, influence other productions, and influence how people see what is possible inside the support. And be them indefectible spheres or just fascinating by their baroquicity, these names just transcend the limits of the media. Such is the case of Ghost in the Shell, a fascinating movie which can be terrifying to a reviewer. Here, the sheer density of possibilities for a review is daunting enough, but to me, the big problem is that probably everything that could be said has been said before I even thought of the possibility of reviewing it, making the review in itself useless with a side of possible involuntary plagiarism. However, in me there's something bigger than the fear of being useless, the want to be useful. I'm somewhat proud of a review I did last March. A follower asked me to talk about Girl, a video from Dalco I still feel has more to be discussed. I had spoken about Me and had gotten the same feeling of incompletion on top of the possible uselessness. But, as difficult as analyzing the two was, I love being able to review something you've requested. And yes, in 2017 there will be more episodes about hentai. This review is also someone's suggestion, and when the goddess of the present recommends you something, you pay attention. Review Ah My Goddess. Ask why is not Oh My Goddess. So it's with some pride of being interesting to someone, and being damn scared of saying little or saying something stupid, or both, that I start this year talking about one of these benchmarks of Japanese animation. Ghost in the Shell. And the movie being made also helps. Vigilante do Amanhã is a stupid title! Oh, sorry. Spoilers! This review is going to be more for those who've seen the movie. I'm avoiding details, but I won't avoid the story too much. Se você ainda não viu, como? Anyways, if you want to, go watch it and come back. Like I'm going back to the topic now. Vigilante do Amanhã is a stupid title, and so is Agente do Futuro. Those are the subtitles for Brazil and Portugal, meaning respectively Tomorrow's Watchman and Tomorrow's Agent. I know, you're afraid of no one wanting to watch it just looking at the title, but believe me, no one watches a movie because of the title. That's why we have synopses, reviews, posters. People discuss more if an American movie should be done entirely with a regional minority. After all, if everything's taking place in Japan, why would only the main characters have to be Japanese? And does the issue go away if they say the movie takes place in the US? On the other hand, a person might not watch it because of a title. And while Vigilante do Amanhã could be just a generic name for a future action story, you're ruining a perfectly autonomous name. The title makes perfect sense for its story, and it's intriguing for those who want to think about it. And why would you worry about the ones who won't want to think about it? They are not going to think about it. Just so you can continue a terrible tradition and have another sci-fi movie with future in the name, together with martial arts movies with dragon in the name, romance movies with love or passion in the name, creating a movie market in which no one can be sure of this or that movie's name, and in which you literally lose sales because of it? Still, it could be worse.
Birthday girl.
Seriously, why would you dumb down a name if you just lose customers? I like talking about languages, and this is a perfect example of how language professionals are castrated. In Brazil, the reality is that it's too easy to see a wormtail become a rabicho. which means tiny tail, but sounds like taily, because translators have to worry about antiquated ideas of what would be appropriate for the market. And after Harry Potter and the Brownie phenomenon, every translation company here should have stopped babyfying things immediately. Instead of letting through enriching ideas, in this case the association of the nickname to the character's attitude. An example recently happened to me in the last joke of my video about Pokemon Marble. Referential humor almost always requires a reference as quickly and as directly grabbable as possible. However, I stumbled upon the problem I'm discussing for over a page. The movie in question is called, in Portuguese, Terror Sem Limites, meaning limitless terror. I'm not going to repeat how stupid it is to break the creative work done on a title, but the translation would lessen the joke. Imagine you never heard of this movie. Why would you think this title is in any way sexual? If you know it, maybe it would work, but if you don't, it seems to me it'd probably work better if the person saw it later and thought about the situation than if they formed their opinion thinking it would be a movie about terrorism. So I prefer to retranslate the title. While it doesn't have the appeal of a generic word like future, shell has the idea of something possibly strong, but in itself empty, a protection that's part of the being's life, but isn't the being itself. In the world of Kokaku Kidotai, full-body cyborgs are a reality, and these are the shells, which means they are a kind of
Metal Slug!
And as soon as someone realizes that definition in the movie, one of the issues explored in the movie becomes clear. How biological is our nature? I'm not going into the philosophical question itself, because it's kind of infinite, like every philosophical question. But making your audience think about it leads them to consider the implications. The main character's despair, which is even more complex than this, yes, I'll get there, and yes, it's heavy, happens in a world in which she wouldn't just be a person with phantom pain wondering if she's incomplete, but a person who doesn't even have her own brain. Yes, the animation implies that, in this group, a person who still has a brain, even if enhanced by machines, is uncommon. This would be a world full of human bodies that might not have anything biological in them, without exactly explaining if that's good or bad. And that's the point. No one knows. We only know it's part of the Major's despair. At the same time, Ghost suggests the spiritual issue of human existence, causing a confrontation between the idea of the non-biological body and the possibility of an essence within a human being. And if the discussion about how biological humanity is would take way too long, I don't even know how to start a discussion about if there is or there isn't a human essence. However, it doesn't necessarily suggest the importance a world like Soul would, or the positive or neutral aspects Spirit would, but rather something negative or without independence, eerie in its existence, but possibly a victim of its own existence or past. All that adds to the issue raised by the use of shell and directs the spectator to the inability of handling the human condition. There's a reason for stories not always using their own terminology in their titles. Doing so requires immense care. And I can't think of a better example than Ghost in the Shell. Even the Japanese title is less effective, but I'll get back to that. Published in 1995, Ghost in the Shell, known here as Fantasma do Futuro or Ghost of the Future, another example of Birthday Girl ruining part of the story's intrigue, deserves, among other classifications, one of the most difficult to earn. Ghost in the Shell is artistic. The discussion about what is art suffers a lot from the difficulty in differentiating between what is concrete evaluation and what is taste. Being that all art has as an objective causing a reaction, at least according to more contemporaneous points of view, artistic is that which leads the spectator to evaluate or re-evaluate their thoughts. I'm sure there's some problem with this definition since art is, again, a philosophical issue, but I need something more practical to show what I mean. And quickly passing through some questions about attempts to define art, but doesn't that mean that non-abstract art isn't art? Of course it is. You can evaluate the technique or what's being shown, for instance. Does this mean art with a practical use wouldn't be art? No, it means it'd be art for those who think about it. That's why some things that are not considered art by some people can be considered art by other people. Like a chair, for instance. Be it because it's a throne and we don't see those a lot, or because it's done using technique from another place, or just because you look at it and you see something you can't really describe. We interrupt this discussion to prevent people from falling asleep and to discuss the movie's story. In a futuristic world, Motoko Kusanagi is a major in the Public Safety Section 9. She's basically a detective investigating a case. But this doesn't mean she's just a copy. I mean personality-wise. She isn't the super correct detective that's offended by the possibility of crime, nor is she the anti-hero investigator that follows the law, but has vices and can commit minor infractions for what he thinks is the greater good. She has an attitude closer to the first one most of the time, but takes part in questionable operations and disobeys orders. In my opinion, that contributes to the movie's sense of realism. While a super correct detective keeps confident he is a part of what's good in the world, the anti-hero investigator feels comfortable with his vices and fights against people who overdo it. Motoko doesn't have the comfort of the first, with her questionable attitudes, nor the comfort of vices. Those are more limitations imposed on her, and it makes sense to me there'd be limits she doesn't even describe if she got to the point of despairing. Maybe it's just me, but Kusanagi's eyes seem to almost always be slightly more open. More than an indication of attention, and in retrospect, despair, this generates a face a bit less expressive, which isn't seen on other characters, which would suggest her situation is uncommon. Also, when she reacts to something, it's quite striking. One of these reactions being exactly when she sees her body used by another. At the same time, it's smart not having too absolute an attitude here. In a world like that of Ghost in the Shell, taking such attitudes could be a declaration of stupidity, especially considering the crimes being investigated. While the concept of ghost isn't explained, I think the only way to talk about the topic without fanaticism, a criminal known as the Puppet Master has been hacking people's minds. Yeah, if you think it's complicated enough, the whole issue of the human condition being limited, and The Pursuit of Happiness, which is a great movie where Will Smith can be a good guy, imagine if the myth of the cave was actually proven true. People are found doing something they think it's for themselves, finding out their belief in that is completely fabricated, and the act in itself is for this criminal's benefit. There are few things that are called worse than death without much discussion. Imagine your beloved daughter doesn't exist.
ご覧なさい。あなたが同僚に見せようとした写真だ。誰が写ってます？
確かに写ってたんだ。俺の娘。まるで天使みたいに笑って。
その娘さんの名前は？奥さんとはいつどこで知り合い、何年前に結婚しました？そこに写ってるのは誰と誰です。
One of the things that anchor this as a detective story more than an anti-hero story, even with a fantasy scenario, is the villain. I love this movie, but thinking about what this being does is terribly frightening and enraging to me. The origin of this villain, with this fucking smile, is particularly unique, but its crimes, assuming they are all like the one most explained in the movie, are so terrible that authors require a situation just as unique to justify such horror. Unless we're talking about Tanabata. You love someone without any limit, and this someone is completely separate from you. You know this someone exists and need to live without him. Even the notion of remembering the person can reduce someone to tears. With a catch. In practically every other scenario, there is a chance of you finding a way out. Here, the person doesn't exist. There is no way of reaching them because they never were. Thinking about a situation where I have to assume at least dozens of people are going through this made me tear up. That means this being, its condition's uniqueness being indifferent, is a criminal and a villain. You can't defend its practices. He's not an egocentric android that moves a planet for not understanding the concept of quality of life, or even a murdering android who didn't know it shouldn't hurt people, and ended up with a stupid head. Save for some info outside the movie, it all points to it simply using people while searching for his own autonomy. And this is the difference between self-centeredness and selfishness. I also have to say that one of the reviewers I watch regularly, Bennett the Sage, speaks on his review of this anime's opening scene marvelously. And you should watch his review and take notes of the choir in the back who is singing a charm to avoid evil spirits during a wedding, suggesting the scene would be a marriage between the brain and the body and a connection to what occurs in the end of the movie. I did, however, notice something else. The singing occurs also in the scene where the city is viewed through various angles, while Motoko is on a boat and sees another similar cyborg. The scene continues showing the same appearance on a store mannequin, going through a number of empty parts of the city and reaching this window, where you could be seeing a mannequin or a man standing outside a store. But which one is true is only revealed when a light passes by, and still he could be a mannequin outside a store. In fact, this happens before with this person, totally still until questioning how long he's been standing there. Maybe a one-scene summary if you wanted to see just the technology versus biology aspect? A OSAS? This is shown right after a scene in which the Major defines what makes her despair. While she thinks of becoming something different and dives even though her body can only sink, as her partner puts it, she still requires her body, her voice, and the information she has access to define herself as an individual. But that also limits her, and even though she can leave her current position, she would have to leave all that defines herself behind. On top of the marriage with technology on the individual level, it seems the Major's despair comes from feeling dependent, to the point she asks herself if she would have an essence or would exist only as a reflex of the situation she's in. Philosophical issue, no way to discuss it quickly. But since I talked about Bennett, one of the differences between our interpretations is the focus, which doesn't mean one of us, or any other by the way, is wrong. Another of the differences, on the other hand, is a bit more complex. While Bennett doesn't see the story as good, I'd say it's actually just simple, about important topics, but simple. There is an advantage. The translation doesn't have to alter the text to match the lip flaps, even if they might.
Eu não tenho fome, não é? Eu não tenho fome, só você.
And, besides to discourse in general, it can make all the difference for something as philosophical as this anime. The scene of Motoko talking about her desperation in English sounds like a person losing control of their line of thought, while the sub is quite direct and easy to follow. And also there's the fact I'm a dude who would expand about the title of a work for over a page, so maybe I just have more of a tolerance to it. If anything, the major problem of the movie's theory is that what's proposed wouldn't work. Motoko wouldn't be freer, just have different limitations. She wouldn't have a humanoid body necessarily, see the puppet master in the movie for clarification, but would be confined to the net. Bigger limits as far as information goes, yes, but smaller as far as moving any object. Even the notion of information being immortal online is false, as the game conservation movement knows well. Which is not to say that a philosophical flaw is a big problem in itself. In fact, you can say this is a reflex of humanity having limitations in evaluating its condition. And that doesn't mean that Motoko Kusanagi couldn't have had a happy ending, given the immense history of humanity finding out we didn't know what we wanted. Another issue I cannot leave uncommented is that of the villain's nature. The puppet master is, for all effects, a program, and it's interested in Motoko. It was forced inside a body and a foreign group wants to force it to work for them. The relationship between it and Motoko is quite complex and could be seen in many ways. The most direct would be like a couple, given the ending I'm not covering directly, but they are also complementary with opposing origins and needs. Something that occurred to me when I rewatched the movie is that the appearance of the puppet master in that body is somewhat sudden. Effective, of course. But in the world of the movie, there is no intro to that factory itself. That happens after he's found. In a movie with so much consideration as to ambience and presenting its elements, this is definitely noticeable. Likewise, despite describing visually the condition Motoko is in very well, the opening scene would be completely disconnected to the story that starts after she wakes up and goes through her door. Given the ending, another candidate for an OSS. Even with the poetic license of angles she couldn't possibly have seen for being a dream, or that those would be for our benefit, the scene would be completely atmospheric and out of the story. Unless, though, if those feelings she doesn't seem to be able to completely explain are like the voice heard on the boat. In other words, Motoko could have dreamt that, as she heard the puppet master saying it would go into the body, which by the way has pretty much the same face. While building the body took only 2 hours, no one knows how long the factory was waiting for the puppet master. Seeing that way, the puppet master's story with Motoko had begun even before we knew who Motoko was, which checks with the way the puppet master is presented in dialogue. It's particularly refreshing seeing something that works and you can watch again and keep finding new things. The bigger question that permeates all of this is not directly put, except for a comment made by the worst villain ever. Watching for the first time, one could have the end as speaking to a unique matter that wouldn't occur easily even in this technologically advanced scenario. It would be a fantastical story. Yet the question in itself is of what's life? It's one of those phrases everyone repeats when talking about viruses and ghosts.
現代の科学は未だに生命を定義することができないのだから。
I remember having school books that still classified mushrooms as plants. It wasn't long ago we even started accepting as part of our general knowledge the existence of the fungi as a kingdom, and I still mix fungi and monera. And have you heard of acetota? Yep, there is a classification integrating virus as a living being. So, how could the movie talk about this without being absolutely idiotic? First, they leave it as a part of the background, which, let's face it, it is. I'm sorry if you give a lot of importance to having a definite answer to what's alive and what isn't. The fact is that our knowledge is limited. You must research before making decisions regarding that, but these decisions are ultimately personal, because there is no definite answer. E é por isso que qualquer oposição à legalidade de aborto ou de eutanásia tem que ser por questões de método. Não pode ser pela sua opinião pessoal. A sua opinião pessoal entra quando você for escolher entre fazer essas coisas ou não. Second, and this is extremely important, and I have seen many students have this problem, they focus on one specific part and discuss it, instead of just throwing their opinion. The movie's discussion is specifically about the parallelism between biological and non-biological beings. Can a non-biological being be alive? Can a biological one not be alive? As I said, the original title itself is less effective than the one in English, and the reason is that it implies this issue and suggests a certain opinion about it. It's very little and my Japanese is very limited, but Kokaku Kidotai is known as Mobile Armor Riot Police. Kidotai, according to Jinbrin, basically means anti-riot police. Ko has the idea of aggressive or attack, and Kaku has the idea of shell. But the use of this reading, according to the dictionary, is for electron shell. Maybe the idea is that the police unit fights against electronic crime? But I can't help but notice that it points to the issue of the movie more directly, so it's less effective in my opinion. Besides that, the idea of aggressive associated suggests the puppet master is a villain. And he definitely is. But this makes the ending being accepted by the audience more difficult. This means the puppet master isn't just being chased, or that there is a more neutral explanation for its crimes. He's aggressive, period. And if on one hand I felt disgust when I noticed that that body would basically be alive when they were manipulating it and breaking it in half, I can feel a little at ease to know that it happened to Harry Carey here. In any event, the bigger issue persists. This non-organic being has a ghost indistinguishable from a normal one, while Motoko Kusanagi questions if her life, although recognized as such, would really be life. Of course, if she weren't, she wouldn't be questioning it. As I said, the movie's philosophy has its flaws. The puppet master, for instance, specifically calls himself incomplete for not being able to reproduce. This is analogous to viruses not being considered alive for not having every of the following parts in their life cycle: birth, growth, reproduction, and death. Of course, that definition is no longer considered absolute. That's what the scientific community does. Something that doesn't work is re-evaluated. As I said, fungi, monera, and acetota. The presentation of the parallel is done contextually in an action scene almost at the end of the movie. And this is good, with the scene basically working by itself, but the parallelism might be too subcontextual. More than once had I seen this scene and thought the tree of species is there for no reason. Thinking about it, assuming that it wasn't put there for no reason, the scene would be a physical representation of the confrontation between the two, her giving more importance to what life would be, him interested in retaining the puppet master to be used. With that point of view, the tree could be seen as a visual representation of that group's attitude. Besides obviously using machines and having an interest in using machines with no consideration for their autonomy, and let's be fair, they hadn't shown any autonomy before. This isn't iRobot. It would add the attitude of using and killing with no regard any living being that isn't directly in their group. The parallelism is suggested, for instance, in the machines having somewhat zoomorphic postures, especially the tank being arachnoid, even if in constant offensive position, which makes sense for a tank. At the same time, while Motoko uses her body to the extreme, she puts herself in similar posture. Both have support that comes after the initial contact, and both are willing to sacrifice for their groups, even if in different ways and for different reasons. And both are selfish. Meaning the only reason I can see for that tree is to demonstrate that this is a battle of philosophies. One group saying they will use whatever is not in their group, and the other saying things outside our group are just as important as us. And finally, I have to comment for those who saw it to the end. Don't see this before seeing the movie. What makes this ending so wonderful? It's that it's basic. Think of how many times the idea of "this will make us a new stage of human evolution" has been presented. This is what all of those stories were trying to do, and personally, this is the only way I've seen that really works. It's not being visually different, it's not having a power beyond normal, it's the simple existence of something near but different, a new adaptation that will interact differently with the world. This is all that is needed to have numerous new possibilities. And I think we don't need an ending for something that ended up being so long, right? But then again, this would be an ending. Those unique productions that... Train. I just started and the train's already... Vigilante do Amanhã is a stupid title, and so is Future Agent. And after Harry Potter and the baby phenomenon, I'm not going to repeat how stupid it is to break the creative work done on a title. Train, 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 train. They hate me and I hate them. I don't even know how to start the discussion about if there is or there isn't an essence to humanity. Last words. Train, train, train. Sweat's dripping down because it's hot as hell. Train, train, train. Sweat's dripping down because it's hot as hell. Can be considered art by other people. Train. The train. When I start singing, the train comes. When I'm not singing, the train comes. The train comes. All over my face. There are few things that get the epithet. There are few things that get the epithet of epithet. I love this movie. I love this movie. Here, train. Here, train. Hour and a half. I am in the second one, but hour and a half. Mushrooms as plants. Mushrooms as plants.